from God, they would ask God and then pull a stone. So do we go to war? Yes. No. That's what we now call divination. That's what tarot does. That's what they were doing then. But the divination that was outlawed then is what we now call hexing.
Let me ask you, just a side note. Is that kind of why you got into some of the stone, or is it just?
No, I mean I'm sure it all ties into being of the same character type, but I mean as far back as I could think of, I've always been picking up stones and collecting stones. Like for example, in biblical times, to be homosexual was not an act of love. It wasn't like I fell in love with this dude. Like Alexander the Great, he used to fuck all his generals because it was a sign of dominance. It was like I'm dominating you. That's what's outlawed in the Bible. A loving relationship
Yeah.
is not the same thing that it's talking about there. That's why so many religions now are kind of okay with gay.
Yeah, see, and that's the other thing, speaking of like all the Bible and everything, and what we talked about. My father, he's Jehovah Witness,
Oh, he's
and
hardcore.
well, see, and that's the thing though. We say hardcore, right? And we think, oh, well, you don't celebrate or do certain things, right? But like you said, as long as there's a sense of respect, then it's all good. But what I was telling them is like I'm thinking of possibly going on a journey to like take all the Bibles or different religions' Bibles and seeing what the difference is, seeing what's missing, seeing what's added, seeing what words are changed, to really search and find out exactly what was meant. I mean, I don't know if I'll know exactly what was meant, but I have a better understanding,
That was
and
me as a teenager.
yeah,
Yeah, literally. Like there's most Bibles right there.
yeah. Because I
It's
just,
a different way of going about it, and I think more than anything, what you're gonna end up coming to the conclusion of is how everything is basically the same, but they're using very different words, and so they don't understand each other and they fight. But I'm gonna be extreme, and this is an extreme comparison, but I truly feel this way. Pentecostals, Christian Pentecostals, they go into this spiritual ecstasy and start speaking in tongues, or they have healings, or or they'll faint. Vino Nuevo here is popular for having the holy laughter, where all of a sudden the whole church starts cracking up ecstatically. At some point, they had the holy vomit, where
oh,
the whole church, well, I mean, the vast majority of the church is throwing up, and this is some sort of cleansing. That's using the Jesus name as the catalyst to all this. Now, take that and view what voodoo and santeria is doing, where they call it being ridden by the spirit, and they go into an ecstasy and speak in spiritual language. Christians call it angelic tongues. They call it spirit. I hear them and they sound alike. I see them and they look alike. They're having fainting, they're having tongues, they're having healing. They both throw up to cleanse. I mean, it looks like the same thing is going on, and they are completely opposed to each other because one feels that they're godly. I mean, they both feel that they're godly, and they both feel the other one is sinister. But they're doing the same thing,
yeah,
and except that in Christianity, we've been civilized by Europe. So the Western thinking, which ends up being the Greek thinking, is what dominates how we put together theology. Voodoo comes from African slaves and they were about, they didn't have the academic resources that Europe had. So to them, it's about nature. It's like, okay, well, God is angry because there's storms, or we must do something for God so that He continues to give us harvest.
Yeah.
Or I might be bad in my life because God is giving me bad health.
Yeah.
So the way they conceptualized it ended up being, I guess, quote unquote, more primitive, but it's the same thing. So if you look at, we're in a 3D world, and if we were to get something 2D, so like for example, two napkins, they only have this way and that way. And I go and I put my three fingers in between them. I'm in the third dimension. So this napkin over here is looking at the three fingers right there, but this finger covers this finger from his perspective. So he says, no, God is two circles. And this napkin is on this and sees the three fingers, and he says, no, God is three circles. But they're in a different dimension. They'll never understand that actually God is a whole different, complete thing in another dimension. It's very likely God is in the fourth, fifth, seventh dimension. We're in the third, and we're fighting over if it's two circles or one.
See, with all that you said, like, as far as I think what happens, I was thinking out loud about religion in a sense, or what people choose to believe. And I thought to myself, there's love and chaos in religion in a sense. Because if, I'm sure there's other religions that don't necessarily believe in, per se, who we perceive as God. But they have their own version, right? Could be the same person, at just their own way looking about it. Or there's people that they believe in multiple gods. But like in the Bible, at least from what I understand, you know, there's only one God, you worship him, right? But the way I look at it, and that's what I see from like religion based, and I was telling about chaos and love, I'm like, how can man or people come up with these religions when we're, in a sense, going through life all the same, yet a branch off of what I believe, which is very similar to maybe what someone else believes, can cause separation. Like it should be, that happens a lot. And a lot of times actually can be love. So that chaos and love. And that's what it made me think, like, how do you bridge it all? Could you bridge it all? Maybe you can bridge it all. There's so many things I've heard, like there's conspiracies about how people say when they might have seen things, or like different altars, or at one point in time there was a use of different I guess to plainly say drugs, but they're what would you psychedelics that help them reach that other possible dimension,
The stone ape theory.
which a lot of different people have mentioned. There's, I guess people nowadays are talking about it a lot, like ayahuasca or something like that. That kind of really is like really kind of kills off your ego kill, and then you really feel at one. So like, I know people will look at me and be like, oh, why would you even like talk about that or share about that, or do things? This is different people who are very strict to, like, oh, like you said, there's an old Bible would say you can't be gay or anything like that and all that stuff. And to me, I'm like, hey, you choose how you live. I mean, and that's where I'm like, God, as long as to me, God, if you follow God, you believe in God, how does all that hate come up when it should just be love and positivity? You know what I'm saying? So like, if I choose to do something, I know I'm a sinner, but at the end of the day, I'm never going to be perfect, but I do try to sin less. We'll never be sinless because we sin a lot all the time. but to sin less and better myself. And that's why I'm thinking of that like journey. And then like what you're saying about the different dimensions really kind of hits, because everybody perceives things so different. And I think that's when people harp on themselves and they beat themselves up so much because they're not following a strict rule of guidelines and all that. But at the same token, like I'd like to believe we're living in this plane or this dimension or this life to experience it in full, but not necessarily. Some people would say we're living in the hell, and I'm saying we're living in what you make it, you know, which should be, let's help another, let's pick each other up, let's not keep each other down. Once this is it, like I don't know what's after this. I mean, people celebrate death. Maybe death is just that next thing that we're all gonna see each other again, and then go to the next step from there, you know. But what you're living right now is like, take advantage. There's so many people who don't get advantage.
Yeah.
And, you know.
So there's a concept, and I think, let me close this so it doesn't blur out the cameras.
I'm sorry, I keep looking at this because it looks
It looks
awesome,
cool.
dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess we should start.
Yeah, we should.
And we'll start with this conversation. It's a good conversation.
Well, we just
keep going with
just
it.
keep going, because it could be this, and we can change. It doesn't necessarily have to be specific. It might be something new that we just came up with. You know, I mean.
So I think we could bridge all religions by possibly coming down to a core, a source. So there's several things you touched on. One of them, for example, within Judaism, there's a concept, there's a train of thought, a study called Kabbalah. Kabbalah is supposed to be the why of everything. You know, the Torah and the Midrash and all the other material that we have available in Judaism is the how. Kabbalah is the why. And then we have this diagram that is supposed to help us understand creation and even ourselves. It's called the Tree of Life, and it has different spheres, Sephiroth, they call them. The very top is Kether, and then it's said that above that is Ein Sof. And Ein Sof is more along the lines of everything that was, everything that is, and everything that will be. So, for example, the name of God. You're not supposed to be able to pronounce that. And so what they did was take away the consonants and the vowels, and just left the consonants so that you can't pronounce it. And we have YH, VH. That's where they get the word Jehovah. That's where they got the vowels from the word Adonai, and they put them into those consonants, and then we came up with Jehovah. So what it's talking about is something that is almost up to an interpretation. So we have Jehovah, we have Yahweh, we have Yahweh, we have a bunch of different ways of pronouncing the tetragrammaton, the YHVH. Sometimes in many Bibles now they just opt by putting Lord instead of a name. In Kabbalah, there's an interpretation that one way of pronouncing that, and I'll probably massacre the pronunciation, but it's something about Yehovah, which means in Hebrew, existence. So now we have two definitions of God. Everything that was, everything that is, and everything that will be, and existence. So at the end of the day, everything that is God. That includes all creation. And that includes all trains of thoughts. It's really weird because when we look at all the concepts of religion, I would think that the closest identification of divinity that there is out there to this is not the mainstream. It's more along like the New Age metaphysical people that talk about the universe. That's probably closer to the truth. One thing is for sure to me. God is not a person. He's not Zeus. He's not in the sky with white hair and a beard looking down, waiting to interact with us. It's more along the lines of potential energy. And we are kind of co-creating with him, where there's a essence of God within us. A quick definition of how we ended up here, or a quick story is, in the beginning there was this dot, that was God. How does God know himself to be good? If all there is that dot. He's the Alpha and the Omega, that's just that dot. And so that dot separates itself and makes a line. And that line separates itself and makes a plane. And now we have a platform. And that platform allows us to have where we could create all this melodrama of life. And so that one little dot explodes, call it a Big Bang or whatever you want. And millions of little sparks come out of it. But each one of these little sparks remembers that it is part of the source. So when you have the source and all these little sparks, are, well, I'm one of you. So you still can't have melodrama. You still can't have separation. So in order for source, potential energy, God, universe, to be separate, he endowed upon each one of those sparks an ego. And then all of a sudden, I feel like an individual. I'm not you, I'm me. Now we're separate. And because now we're separate, we now have egotistical drives, individualistic motives. And now those motives could clash, and now there's drama. So now we could have life. And at the end of the day, all of that drama is just so that God could know himself to be good. It's just so that God could know himself to be source. So life is meant to be giving us blows and making us learn how to kill the ego. I think it was Paul that said, I must die so that he could grow within me. I think it was Plato that said, we are the atoms of God. And so at the end of the day, we're co-creating life according to the divine laws, according to everybody's interactions, everybody's mentalities, but it's all a big play. And at the end of it all, when it all goes away, we're all going to be out of our ego and realize that we're all one. So we have God that was everything that was, everything that is, and everything that will be. We have God that is existence. We have an essence of God within us. We have creation being ruled by divine laws. It seems like it's a system meant to show us that even though there's drama and misunderstanding among us, because our egos get in the way, at the end of the day, it's all source. For all we know it, we may just be some random dream of what we call God that is going on. We may be a really advanced AI that feels...
So let me ask you, because everything you're saying, and I'm obviously speaking for myself, being that I probably think there's other people out there too that might have a similar opinion. So many people out there, there's got to be someone else that probably might think this. But what do you go about with what you just said, balance, as we spoke about before, not stepping on God's toes or not offending anybody, because we can talk. You can give me your views. I can give you my perspectives. We respect each other, and we can have a grown-up conversation about it. But there's going to be people that possibly could be, let's say they listen to this and they're like, oh, just changed their whole mindset about Caleb. Like, how do you navigate that, or you know, or go about that? Because me, I mean, I'm all good with it. That's cool. I take in everybody's perspectives, and I'm open-minded about things because ultimately I really don't know. No one knows the whole, how what it is. They go off the Bible, and I know people who say the Bible is the word. That's what it is, but there is still some.
Editing.
Yes, that is probably going on that drives my curiosity to really want to find and search for the truth, which maybe I'll never completely find. Maybe the truth is based on everyone themselves and what they deem it, in a sense. Like, hey, I know there was life before me, but in a sense, it's almost like the life I have is the life. But I do know there's history because people have recorded, so I understand that. But at the same token, like you said, who knows? AI,
Yeah.
maybe this is all what's going on, and they're running me through a program. They're like, okay, how are you going to do this in your life? Or what are you going to do with this? And that's why when it all boils down for me, it's just, I listen and respect other people, take other people's opinions in consideration. There's certain things that I know that are a hard fact that you just cannot, deny. But then there are some things that, yeah, as long as you're respectable, you're out there, you need to search for the truth for yourself.
Yeah.
So what do you like? How do you like?
So we started out by saying, how do we not step on God's toes? Well, the way I go about this is by realizing that there is that divine spark within me. So what I have to do is not worry about whether I'm aligning myself to a doctrine or a dogma, but worry about whether my conscience, my spirit is at peace. As long as the famous saying, we're not perfect, we're perfectible. As long as we feel that we're always doing what is correct, whether we make a mistake or not, we're not going to step on God's toes. We're going to be okay, and the outcome will be okay. I believe that the way we do this is by everything you do it for God. And then it sounds kind of generic. But this means that you don't do it for a religion. You don't do it for a philosophy. You don't do it for a culture. You don't do it for society. You're doing it for the ultimate, highest good you could conceive. And so as long as you're guarded there, you will be okay, your life will be okay, and you will be at peace, your soul, your consciousness will be at peace. Now, whether we upset other people or not, I like to believe I'm diplomatic, but the older I get, the more I realize that I'm not that diplomatic. And so I think the bottom line is just having a bit of tactic and realizing when to say what. But that being said, whether somebody gets upset or not about my beliefs, it's really not my concern. I mean, at the end of the day, everybody has to have something that they hold on to, or else they're going to be pretty lost in life. And if it offends you that I have chosen to rationalize my spirituality this way, then perhaps there needs to be a bit more of a spiritual maturity. Once again, we should always try to be diplomatic and respectful, but at the end of the day, we should realize that everybody's going to believe what they're going to believe. And if I offend you, um, I'm, I wish I could say I'm sorry. I'm sorry you feel that way, but I'm not sorry about my beliefs. I've worked very hard to rationalize this to get here. I've studied very much, and perhaps that's what I need to do. They need to do, I mean. Now, there's a big difference, though. The fact that I say that I hold on to something as truth does not necessarily mean to me that that's a perpetual truth, because I am very much limited by my impulses. I'm limited by my rationalization, by my past experiences. I'm limited. I'm an emotional person, you know. So to have the belief that I'm always going to be right, is already a limitation. Now I am always right, but I mean I tried being wrong once. I just didn't like it. No, but seriously, I think that as long as you're trying to understand that you could be wrong, then you'll be open to hearing something. Now, like I said, I worked hard to get to the realization or the rationalization that I have, but nothing thrills me more than intellectual stimulation, than spiritual stimulation, and I can't wait to find someone that proves me wrong, because now I find a higher truth. So I don't always want to be right, you know? So if it upsets someone, that's probably the mentality they should be adopting. Now,
Gotcha.
what does upset me is fanaticism, is ignorance, superstition. You know, and is it up to me to change it? No, but I will point it out. Whether I'm right about doing this or not, that's, I guess, up to the individual. But there is a limitation when you believe blindly, or when you believe, or when you believe out of tradition. You know, I've bounced around from religions and faiths and systems and all kinds of things, and have come up with something that I'm okay with. I think everybody needs to question themselves constantly. And if you can't question yourself, there's probably something you unconsciously or consciously know is wrong with your belief. So the question was, how do you not step on God's toes, and how do you not step on other people's toes? By doing everything for God. And then everything else just lands in its place.
What would you say to anybody who doesn't necessarily have a belief? I know I would say, hey, you know what? I don't necessarily push religion on to people, but I do say, hey, maybe you should give God a chance. You know, I always tell people that I don't always go to church, especially with the pandemic that happened. You know, I was going quite often, but when I was younger, and I mean all the way up until probably like 30 or something, you know, I would go to church here and there. But God, I've always chose to believe in God, and God has shown up for me. And what I found out now is I would only go to God when I was in need, when I needed something, when I was in trouble. And then after that, that'd be it. But now, pretty much in almost everything I'm doing now, which I've seen my life just take a big turn, and it's going, you know, good. I give God everything, you know, tell him thank you for the laughs. Thank you for the cries. Thank you for this obstacle that happened. I know you were there with me to get through it. And I always think of it like this when I tell people, say, hey, have you ever, has any of your friends or has anybody took you out just to hang out and pay for your food or eat? When they're done and it's all said and done, do you thank them for what they've done for you? Yeah. Well, why wouldn't you thank God for the many things he's doing every day for you? And that keeps my mentality of, hey, trying to remember to thank him every day. And I've seen big improvements in life. Now, that's just my story. And I can go in deep detail another day of just the craziness that I've been through and how he's came through, like miracles.
Yeah.
You know, but at the same token, there's, I guess, the way I used to be versus the way I'm now. Sometimes people, it's very, like, it's a tightrope I have to walk, because there's that mentality of people think, oh, well, you think you're better than me now and all that. It's like, no, not at all. I just want the best for you. I just want you to grow. And then when you say something like that, oh, well, you're saying I'm staying, and like, no, so there's always things like that. So it was very hard. You got to tread softly. But ultimately, in the end, for anybody that I talk to or that I pray for or any of that, it's because I want you to be happy.
Yeah.
Everybody deserves happiness and success, and you know, that's what I ultimately want for a lot of people. So it's crazy. I know for me to just turn my back, because there's been times still maybe where maybe I forgot to, went in a little rut, and I'm just like, in the rut, definitely I should be praising, giving thanks to God. But at the same token, when I'm happy, I should be giving thanks to God and all that. So that's just how I see and how I feel, and that's
So the question is how you deal with people that don't believe.
well, what would you
What would
say
I
to
say?
if you see like
So when people tell me I don't believe in God, my response is I don't either. Because it's very, 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 very likely that I don't believe in the God that they don't believe in. It's very, very likely that they have a concept of God that is based on mainstream, that is based on the cultural religion, that is based on something that hasn't gone beyond what is the norm. So I would say I don't believe in God either. I don't believe that there is a Zeus. I don't believe that there is this vengeful, emotional God. Once again, I believe God is existence. So you could choose to call it. Now, I grew up in this culture, so it's easy for me to refer to it as God. But I don't have a problem saying universe. I don't have a problem saying my higher self, source. I don't have a problem saying I don't believe in any God, I believe in science. Where does science come from? At the end of the day, if you're reasoning and finding out the inner workings of mankind, that's because you have that divine essence within you. Now we talk about thanking for the things that God does. And some would say, well, God doesn't do anything for me. And I would ask, well, who's breathing? Who's beating your heart? Can you consciously stop beating your heart? Can you consciously stop thinking? So who's thinking? Who's beating your heart? It's not you. You can't. You're in a vessel and living out life, but the number of beats you have is not up to you.
that's very deep there, man.
And so I tend to believe that religion is the worst thing that could have happened to God, because it became a system, it became an order, and it became something that was tied into ruling governments and monarchs and power. If we take religion for what it's meant to be, we wouldn't need dogmas and doctrines. The word religion comes from the Latin word religare, which means, ligar means to tie. Re is to redo. So to retie. Therefore, religion means to retie. Anytime you do anything that makes you think of God, you just had a religious moment. You don't need doctrine for that. You need to appreciate nature. You need to feel the love of your kids. You need to know how to give of yourself. You see that girl you like, and all you ever want to do is give the best of you. You're having a religious experience. That's what God does. So if we take away religion and seek to have those godly moments, then at that point, we don't need a title for this thing. We don't need to call it God, science, universe, source. great being or whatever. So when somebody tells me, what do I do when somebody says they don't believe in God? I typically say, I don't believe in God either. And I would say that I've yet to find somebody whose God they don't believe in that I also don't believe in.
Definitely, man. I understand it with you, at least how I'm interpreting it. And I'm glad that you said it, no holds bar and everything, because your perspective on that may be just what someone needs to hear, to, in a sense, bring them to what I choose to have perceived of what God is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I think the best way to find God is to look within yourself. You mentioned Jesus earlier. At some point, Jesus turns around and says, the kingdom is within you. He didn't say the kingdom is amongst you. He said within you. That's between your back and your chest. You want God, you got to seek that deepest cave that there is. That dark abyss where the soul lives. But before you get to that, you're going to run into your ego. And when you run into your ego, it's very likely you're going to stay there fighting it for a minute and a half. And every now and then, you'll be able to beat them down and get a glimpse of the true self. But it's going to come back up. And so, at the end of the day, if you really want to find God and find a perspective that you could hold on to, simply try to do everything for God, whatever way you conceptualize it. And understand that as long as you're doing it for God, even when you're making a mistake, it's going to be okay. Whether that God is your own self. I don't see a problem with somebody imagining or idealizing the most perfected self out there and choosing that to be God. Because at the end of the day, the most perfective self out there of me is going to be a me without an ego. And all that's left behind is a divine spark. So if it's easier for people to think that there is a potential me that could potentially be perfect, even in just an idealistic, psychological, astral way of thinking, just in a thought, and you hold on to that as a God, that's okay. That's the same thing Jesus did.
That's definitely great words. Great words for anybody who's possibly trying to maybe establish a connection or find with themselves. Maybe people think something is wrong with them when really there isn't. It's just everybody has their own route to find God, in a sense, within themselves, and that searching for truth.
Don't be nice to them. There's something wrong with them. There's something wrong with all of us. There's a lot of things wrong with us. That's the problem. But that's what gives us access to God. It's in those moments of complete failure. It's in those moments of complete vulnerability that our ego isn't strong. And so when our ego isn't strong, it's a lot easier to access God. And so if they feel there's something wrong with them, there is, and they should work on it, because that's what's going to lead them to it. It's not okay to have a detrimental life because you feel inadequate. It is very okay to understand that there's things you're inadequate in and you must resolve. And if in this moment of your life you're feeling inadequate about your beliefs of God, then look into it. The problem is when people feel that they're not okay and are okay with not being okay. But yeah, we all have problems. I think if anyone has any, it'd be me. You don't come to deep thoughts without deep pain. You don't come to deep perceptions of divine, of life, deep philosophies without much battles, internal battles. You don't come without having to first be in that state of vulnerability. As long as your ego is super strong and you do feel that you are invincible, then it's gonna be hard to look beyond your ego. It'll be great for business though. I think that that's why we can't and should not get rid of our ego completely, because we still need to interact in this life. To a lot of people, the most saintly person is not who they're going to listen to. To a lot of people, it's the successful one that they're going to listen to. The guy with the business and the money, to a lot of people, that's the one that got it right. Not knowing what their internal state is. So if we want to be a good example or be, I guess, another way to look at it is, you could be godly by being frum, they call it, to being this person who's always trying to be righteous. But you could also be godly by being fair in business. You could also be godly by being philanthropic. You could also be godly by being a great teacher, by being a great employee. So at the end of the day, that's exactly what it's all about.
I think actually that would be good to close on that. Just really trying to be godly in what you can be, control the controllables. Yeah, no, that was, you really touched on a lot of things that I've never really even thought about, which now definitely I can kind of take in what you said and just kind of have a different outlook on it, to take in consideration things. So,
And we talk about controlling the controllables, and believe me, it's nice to have control, but it's very much not going to be the case in the majority of time of situations. There's that 80-20 rule. 80% of the things that happen to you are out of your control. 20% are the ones that you somehow caused. So if this is the case, and you cannot be in control of the majority of things, you need to come down to the core of the situation and figure out what is the one thing that I can't control. And that's a lot of times finding a way to respond correctly. I tend to be a very passionate person. I tend to be very ingrained in my idealism, and that sometimes makes me a little impulsive. It sometimes makes me be a little bit intense. And so if I know this and I don't figure out a way to deal with these impulses, then I'm gonna be having reactions to most things that I can't control. And it happens often, believe me. There's a lot of things that just go beyond my control. But in more now, in these last 2-3 months, my biggest focus has been self-control and evolution on myself, changing my perspective, addressing emotions. And so it's been an intense 2 months, which is probably why I have all this right freshly to talk about. But that's what we could control, the way that we respond. So taking less reactions or having less reactions and more responses will probably be beneficial to us. If we respond based on an idealistic role model, an idealistic self, or a concept of a God figure, there's back in the early or late 90s, there was this thing called "What Would Jesus Do?"
Yeah, yeah.
It's a cool concept. Before you make any reaction, you have this figure of a perfect being. What would that perfect being do?
Yeah, I remember those bracelets and all the stuff that they would have around, lanyards and everything. But it was a great reminder. It
Yeah.
definitely was. Well, Caleb, I appreciate your time, man. Any last closing words that you'd want to say that you really, that you just for anybody out there listening or watching, or
Anybody out there
I just
listening
know
and
this
watching?
whole entire thing though has been, I've taken in a lot in. Like I said, I'm all about listening to other people's perspectives, their ideas on different things, and I mean, there was a lot of truth in what you were saying, and that's one of the reasons why I really enjoy talking with you.
Appreciate that.
Your life experiences and things that you're willing to share and talk about, and I know this has been like one of the passions that you've gone through your life. So, yeah,
Well, I mean, I believe that being perfect is definitely nice, but the realization that we're not is handy. I was mentioning off camera to you that I've come to this realization lately that I've been way too hard and strict on myself, and these mess ups I have where I shoot myself in the foot out of an impulse, out of a reaction, and not a response, end up causing me emotional turmoil and psychological issues. And so that again, the biggest focus the last couple of months have been very much on myself. And so if anybody takes anything out of this conversation, it's the fact that perhaps we should stop worrying so much about not being perfect. We should stop worrying about stepping on God's toes or on anyone's beliefs, and just simply focus on ourselves. I I feel like I have a 15-year-old daughter, and every few months I'll hear something along the lines of her saying, "I'm a different person." And you understand at that age there's so much changing, but honestly I feel that the as each day goes by and I get more into this shadow work and trying to change my essence, I wake up being a different person. And I think that that's okay. And I think people should be okay with change. Um, I think people should be okay with letting go and 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 the fact that we make mistakes. So I guess that could be brought to a simple phrase of knowing how to have self-love and self-forgiveness. And it's not easy. It's not easy because you expect so much of yourself. I look around and I hear comments about how cool your life and how cool you do this and how this and that. And I think a lot of times my focus is on what I don't have, and it should be on what I have. I'm learning and making every bit of effort to learn how to enjoy the moment instead of always thinking and trying to make things perfect, and just letting go and going with the flow. So my advice for those that haven't or are where I'm at, that would be it. But I'm sure many have already surpassed me on that maturity, so I might not be of much help there on that regard. But shadow work is important, and understanding that you could forgive yourself, and understanding that all you have is you, and all you could really do is try to improve. You try to improve every day, things will land on their own, things will happen on their own, and the people that need to be in your life will be in your life, and the ones that need to be gone are gonna be gone. And it sucks, because you don't want some of those people to be gone, but it's oftentimes what's best. And so if we just are able to have this contentment and gratitude for life, for the fact that we don't have to worry about beating our heart, then it could be a lot easier to enjoy life.
Awesome, man. Like I said, I'm out of words as far as our conversations, because you hit a lot of different topics, and you're so genuine and authentic about it. And I really do feel. I mean, we came in here like, hey, we're just gonna we'll just see what our setup looks like to talk about what we can do. And
Yeah,
then,
by the way, guys, this is a system test, equipment test.
equipment test. And yet we're having such a deep conversation, and we're just being vulnerable and just opening up. And what you're saying is gonna emanate with so many out there that are probably out there, that
God
can
willing.
take some of it. So
There's few things better than intellectual stimulation. There's few things better than emotional stimulation, spiritual stimulation. And there's few things better than knowing that I'm on film and I'm being vulnerable and transparent because, well, for one, we live in a very small town and word gets around. And so I might as well be the same person here, there, and everywhere, because it's gonna bite me in the butt if I'm not. So I rather just lay myself out there and hey, I'm in repair. There's things that need to be fixed. And if anyone out there is trying to pretend that they're not, you're full of shit. That's the bottom line. I
Yeah.
mean, and really honestly, when we are honest with ourselves, a real honesty makes it hard not to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
But it's okay to be vulnerable.
Yeah,
It takes no power away. In fact, I believe it gives you some.
I do. I strongly believe that too, because like you said, like, be yourself. Don't hide who you are, whether you're on camera or you're just in person or anything like that. Be who you are, and there will be no false image of you anywhere. So I think just being genuine and authentic, just it's good for you. You're not lying to yourself. It's good for people. They understand who they're dealing with, who wants to be around someone that puts on a show and act, and then there's someone different, and then it's someone that you look up to in a sense, or maybe someone's saying that, hey, you're a role model, and then come to find out you're not who you say you are.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I definitely understand that, and I think that's really cool, and that's why I try to surround myself with people like that. Try to be that way in a sense. I'm more outgoing sometimes. I can be. I think everybody gets a little silly at times, but other than that, I mean, for the most part, what you stand for and your character and all that other than your words, sometimes it's kind of like all that you have.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it gives you, I guess the hope is that those who know you enough, as long as you're transparent, when word comes around and people are talking things that are being added, it should be easier for people to understand when it's not true. It should be easier for people to understand, oh, that's hearsay because this person is like this. We know him to be like this. Faults and all. I mean, there's things that are gonna trigger me, and everybody knows them. And there's things that are gonna make me smile, and everybody knows them. I mean, I'm human, you know. So as long as you keep that, you know, it gives you that advantage that when there is that word of envy out there, others could write it off easily. At least that's the hope.
Yeah. Well, it was a heck of a test.
Yeah, right?
I mean, we'll just probably put it out there because I mean, it went so well. So.
Equipment works.
Yeah. Well, definitely, I appreciate it, man. Thank you for having me over. Thank you for talking with me.